Our text was from the 9th chapter of Luke, rather near the midpoint of Jesus' public ministry in that gospel. By the end of the chapter, in verse 51, Jesus will have set his face to Jerusalem to make that long journey to a place of hostility and ultimately death. We read a version of this story every year on Transfiguration Sunday. It's recorded in Matthew and Mark and in Luke. And that can all lead us to think of this account as some kind of large-scale unveiling of the nature and identity of Jesus. But if we close our eyes and we listen carefully to the text as it is recorded for us by Luke, we can hone in on some easily glossed over details that illumine the story for our lives. First, and this detail is suggested only in Luke's version, the experience of the Transfiguration is placed in the context of prayer. Jesus takes Peter, James, and John with them, and it is while Jesus is praying that the appearance of his face changes and his clothes become dazzling white. Yes, it's the intimate, set-aside, intentional activity of prayer. That's where the illumination occurs. Next, and speaking of intimate, I think it's important to bear in mind that the scene of the Transfiguration is not like the feeding of the 5,000. It's not a rock concert. It's Jesus and 3 invited close friends that have an encounter with God. That's it. It's like being enveloped by the desolate Scottish Highlands. It's mysterious. It's mystical. It's evocative. And indeed, it didn't go on to become front-page news articles at the end of the reading. Do you remember what Luke wrote? And they kept silent. And in those days, told no one any of the things they had seen. Its impact was far-reaching, but the details of the experience were theirs alone. And third, and also significant for our lives, the text reveals that the Transfiguration, while it occurs to Jesus, seems to be primarily for the benefit of the disciples. For did you notice the words that were placed on the mouth of God? Not, "You are my son," but, "This is my son." And the voice ends not with God saying, "Jesus, listen to me," but rather directing the words to the disciples, "Listen to him." For the disciples, the Transfiguration is a marker. It's a cairn along their life's way. In one sense, it was like a cairn on the summit of a mountaintop. After all, there they were praying and getting sleepy on the top of a mountain, and then, like a glimpse of a monument of stones at the peak, the disciples recognized that they were receiving a message from God. They had an intense personal experience where the identity of Jesus became clear, and that following him was following a revelation of God, and that Jesus' words, his attitudes, his actions were to have authority in their lives. But in another sense, this was also just a cairn of passage from one point on their journey to the next. I mean, life went on. A special moment, yes, but not a culmination, but rather more a reiteration of their own identities and purpose as disciples. And for the disciples, the Transfiguration wasn't to be reduced to some kind of incredible scene to blab about. It was a private message with a very public meaning. Because like a cairn, it signaled to them how they were to live out the balance of their journeys as they came down the mountain. They were supposed to listen and follow their Lord. The Transfiguration was just like one more cairn leading them on a path of discipleship. Cairns, mysterious, mystical, memorable. And guess what? They are around us still. And they can be a part of your life every bit as much as they were a part of Peter's and James and John's. But you do need to look for them, watch for them, believe that God is placing them in your life's way. Luke's version of the Transfiguration account reminds us that some cairns won't be discerned without prayer. So I ask you, do you get on your knees in the morning or close your eyes in the midst of a question or a quandary or a life choice? Do you open yourself up to God's presence? Do you pray in the midst of your life? How often do you look and listen for what God might be speaking? Words of wisdom, direction for your life, cairns. We read this morning that the disciples were weighed down with sleep, just as we so often are weighed down by the day-to-day issues and demands and routines of our lives. And yet, because they stayed awake, Luke says they saw Jesus' glory and his connection to Moses and Elijah. See, to catch that glimpse of a cairn in a sometimes desolate journey in the expanse of our life's highlands and lowlands, we need to be intentional. We need to pray. Some cairns are visible and accessible to everybody. There can be significant world events or national events, wondrous or tragic, that jolt us into new and different directions. But I dare say most of the God-shaped cairns that come to our minds, like the one we read about this morning, they're intimate, they're personal, things that touch our very own unique and singular life, that in the end are only apprehended by the depths of our own experience. Might be a person, a Sunday school teacher, maybe a youth leader that gave you a spiritual direction for your journey. Maybe there's a family member or another person that God placed in your path. It could be a milestone event like the birth of a child or a hard-earned graduation or even a painful divorce that God uses to mark and direct your path. It could be an experience of illumination when you're able to set aside your own agendas and your own answers for a little while and allow that fresh Spirit of God fall upon you, clear out those cobwebs, and recognize, wow, God did listen to me, and I need to listen more carefully and read my Bible. Today, on this Transfiguration Scottish Sunday, I invite you to reflect. What have been the cairns in your life? Where or when or through whom has God guided you along life's way? Have you acknowledged them? Have you thanked God for them? If it's a person, have you thanked that person for being that cairn? Have you prayed for the guidance that they have to give? And as you come down the mountain and that cairn that's been marked, as you continue on your path, have they become a part of your ongoing journey? I mean, do they inform you? Remember those disciples, they maybe didn't talk about that vision, but boy, they carried that cairn with them. It was a marker that left an impact. Markers that help you listen and respond to the light and the glory and the voice of God. So like the ancient Scottish blessing, Jesus says to each of us today, I am present in your life's journey, and I will put a stone in your cairn. Look for them. Pray for them. Believe that God is real and intimately involved in your life, the lowlands and the highlands, the crowded places and the empty spaces. Watch, listen, heed the cairns, which can be moments of grace leading you home to the heart of God.